Kia ora, and welcome to the final game of the Division 1 New Zealand Mixed Ultimate Frisbee Championships. We're here for the finals with Marvelous DC against HMC. Marvelous DC coming from Wellington, the capital region, and HMC from Canterbury. I am Kelsey Bielik.
And my name is Blair Monroe.
And we're your eyes and ears on the ground, guiding you through this final championship match between the two teams at this tournament, raking their way to identify themselves as the top two teams who will emerge victorious.
3 letters, HMC, MDC, 3 letters, 2 teams, only 1 winner. Peter Hoban on a great deep cut.
And talking to Coach Tom Fraser of HMC before this game, he mentioned that they'd be pulling on their hot magical charisma. HMC standing for a variety of things. They ask players, what does it stand for to you? Generating that D and converting here. Beautiful catch, and in these rainy conditions, we're going to see a lot of slides there.
Cameron Bennett finds Furs, number 12, center field.
And conditions not ideal for Ultimate Frisbee with the rain coming down. I mean, definitely could be worse, but these players fighting tooth and nail regardless of the conditions. You know, it's uncontrollable and therefore, you know, out of minds.
Just really, really great clinical Frisbee. We've seen this from both teams.
And a point. We see Clark celebrating there. HMC hands in the air, and this is awesome for them. Talking to Marvelous DC coach before the game, Goose mentioned that what Marvelous DC wants right now, what their goal is here, is to bring the energy. First and foremost, they want to assert their dominance in the first few points. Now, with HMC coming out strong at a point like this, it's really going to put them on the back foot and question, you know, how can we bring out this dominance when the other team scored that first point? So, Marvelous DC maybe to reassess what their goal is here moving into the second point of the game.
Just a fantastic early break that we're seeing from HMC. So far up until this point, even despite the light rain, which is getting heavier now, a nice light sort of cross breeze coming towards the near side of the sideline, we've seen nothing but perfection from this team, and to see them concede a break so early on in the tournament, they'll need to sharpen things up, get back to the Marvelous DC that we've seen so far if they want to really push this HMC team and maintain the dominance that they've held of the New Zealand Ultimate scene thus far.
And difficulties with the weather now. I mean, the wind is what it is and the rain is what it is. Unfortunately, when they're together, it can lead to difficulties not just throwing and catching, but also with vision when the rain is being blown directly into your eyes. We're seeing that's not a problem with the Marvelous DC players right now. Heather Hickey open on the field there. Back to Haberfield, faking for that deep look, and seeing Soper coming around for the dump. Finding Hickey again in the midfield. She was sitting out a few games earlier, I know, due to a head injury. She wanted to keep things safe, and here she is out firing. Haberfield launches deep, looking for Weatherall, streaking there.
Too much. It's outside the near sideline now. So HMC with yet another opportunity. We know they're capable of working the disc. They can bring it back upfield.
Weatherall there going for the bid, even though she knew it was out of bounds. You know, whether it's to fire her up, whether it's to show HMC on defense that we're going to be getting these. When they're in bounds, you know, we're going to be giving it our all to keep those discs live and turn those points. Regardless, she puts her body on the line.
Just turning the intensity up to 100% from the get-go. No hesitation.
And as you mentioned, Blair, we've got HMC on offense now. We've got some switches, bracketing, which we were seeing in the earlier game.
Just a really, really nice movement by HMC. Caitlin Wood with a deep cut to pull back Soper as we get a nice undercut, but it's dropped. Marvelous DC with an opportunity for a point of their own, hoping to bring it back to 1-1.
Soper faking the around and going for the high release backhand downfield. Hickey sees it into her hands.
But a contact was called. Or either a pick or a foul. We've seen conflicting signals on the field.
So both of these teams really deep in their own right. Marvelous DC maybe with a bit more of a legacy as they've won back-to-back championships. I think Mr. Troy Stevenson himself mentioned that they're looking at winning the back-to-back not sure how many times.
Just all the backs, really.
They have all the
Shakespeare
backs.
wrote about 2 backs. Marvelous DC wanting all of the backs back-to-back championships.
And HMC giving them the run for their money here. Some might call them the underdogs. Really feisty, hungry for the win.
So we're just waiting for the players to figure out what the best resolution is based on the calls that were made. Again, the sport of Ultimate played, in this instance, 7-a-side mixed gender sport where males and females can come together and compete as equals, but it's self-officiated, so you won't see any referees on the field. It's the players themselves who take it. The onus is on them to learn the rules, to implement them in play situations, and to maintain as calm and objective a perspective as possible. In fact, one of the key things, despite we're seeing a contested call being made, is that it's not about the players having the calls fall in the way they want them to happen. It's about what did happen.
And great communication there, especially with the hand signals, letting not only the players on the field, but also the players on the sideline, fans and any viewers watching who can recognize those ultimate Frisbee calls and the hand signals, that body language of what's going on. Again, contested, foul, disc going back to Soper. And this is a dangerous area for DC to have the disc. For such a well-drilled team, they do have, their end zone is clinical. We've seen them pull it out, and when they revert into their end zone, 9 times out of 10, it is resulting in a score for them. So the closer they get to this space, again, doing the same thing, Hickey seeing the disc into her hands, and wow, great pressure on defense there. Unfortunately, not enough. Furs putting his body on the line, trying to hit that disc down. But Neil, I think, seeing it into his hands.
We'll get to see that again. And Heather Hickey receiving the disc.
Going for the assist. Neil streaking up for that strike cut, but first just jumping into position. Can't quite get there to generate the D.
Great pressure from HMC. We've seen them generate a turn already and use that to create a hold for them. MDC now, despite a couple of turns, a hold of their own. So the score goes to 1 apiece. Marvelous DC to come out on defense now. A hotly contested game. One that I think everyone in attendance has been looking forward to. Previous years, we saw Marvelous DC play off against their sister team, so the club put in 2 teams, very, very lean rosters. Having reconsolidated that, it means that we were guaranteed to see a non-Marvelous DC team in the final, particularly when Marvelous DC, as lovely as they are, having exerted such dominance over the New Zealand Ultimate scene, it's nice to see them in a situation where they might be pushed, and HMC, the hopes of the nation almost, to see whether or not they will be able to push MDC for their first loss of the tournament.
And HMC over here, similar to a few of the clubs we're seeing out of Auckland, Old Boys, Space Invaders, they're actually a lot of uni players and uni graduates. Some dominant handlers here. We've got Ziana Manzel and Tom Fraser. Tom Fraser, who's really worked with the University Club. Ryan Sheridan going for that that swing pass. Lots of these players, Joe Panay with that undercut, have played together for years in university. They've been brought into the scene together and have that experience.
Movement from the HMC offensive line.
Tom Fraser just holding on to the disc there. Really great to see these matchups. Sheridan,
an off-balance forehand, a laser, almost like sending a buzzsaw through the air, but HMC secures it.
And Marvelous DC coming out with such intensity, and I think this is one of the few times that they're really seeing that match. Another team here just with matching that energy. Sheridan, they're breaking ankles to cut back to the open side.
Just fantastic athleticism and great ultimate. Joseph Penaya with the score. Mr. Consistent puts another one on the board, going 2-1 against Marvelous DC.
And through the legs, just celebrating that point.
It's such a rare thing to see Marvelous DC on the back foot like this. And in fact, one of the earlier games against the Space Invaders took half. Marvelous DC had to use the timeout to really reevaluate what they were going to do. Started playing some of their more experienced players, just focusing, recognizing games need to be won in order to move through to the finals. Marvelous DC have done it, but now we're in that same situation. They're really being pushed by another really solid, great team. The offensive combinations of Sheridan, Fraser, and Penaya just working the disc backwards and forwards, creating those openings, really just cracking open the Marvelous DC defense.
And also, of note, I think it's really exciting to see here, consistently when I've seen Marvelous DC coming out, they're the ones who have been bringing the intensity and the pressure to the field, regardless of the team they play. We've been seeing them bring out with this energy and speed, just punishing any mistakes. And what's surprising to me here is that HMC have really brought that out here. I'm seeing them as a team and I'm thinking, wow, that's what Marvelous DC has been doing this entire tournament.
Furs with a great roller pull, hoping to trap Neil on the sideline, but he sends a crossfield hammer. Heather Hickey's able to keep it. Liam Haberfield, the big guns, sends one back. Heather Hickey on the far sideline now, so they attempted to trap on the near sideline, but they've had to move backwards and forwards.
They're just moving the disc across the field so fast. If they keep doing this, it's really going to tire the cup out. Right now, just some small give-and-go passes until Clark bites in there. Stop doing that, guys. If you're going to do that, I'm going to get in the way.
Soper goes up. A nice, clean shot through to the middle of the field, finding
Milden Hall. And we're seeing, again, that same energy. Marvelous DC responding on offense here with that same energy I think we just saw from HMC and sealing that point into the safe hands of Haberfield.
Great score by Marvelous DC. Both teams quick off the mark, exploding out of the gates with the kind of intensity that's seen them dominate the pool play and the lower parts of the championship bracket to meet in the finals. It is 2 points apiece. It's anybody's game.
You know what? We are still at the beginning here, but already this is such an exciting final. You know, seeing the energy that both teams are bringing out here, they were so pumped, and we even saw in the last game, the consolation game, we saw them both warming up on the sidelines. They both want this so much, and you know, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the throws, the catches, the teamwork, but also that desire, that burn to dig deep and come out with this. I'm really excited. They're matching them with that energy.
Those fires not yet been put out the rain. The conditions are starting to pack it in a little bit. We're seeing a lot more rain, a lot more wind. Now, this kind of final happening on a sunny day probably wouldn't lend it the gravity that it deserves. We've got an undefeated juggernaut of New Zealand Ultimate, Marvelous DC, facing off against HMC, a club only in their second season, having pulled players from a bunch of different places, really tightening things up over the course of the tournament. The weather really lending a gravity to this to remind us all just how significant this moment could be for either of these teams.
Looking at that line, we're probably going to see Manzo, Penaya, Ryan Sheridan handling with the disc there. We've got T-Frey, season handler as well, Tom Fraser, bringing the disc down and choosing not to catch that pull, but see it into the ground.
Perhaps taking lessons from some of the earlier games where the conditions have made those pulls drop, causing quick turnovers, refusing to let that happen, not giving Marvelous DC a short path back to the zone for a score.
Ooh!
A huge amount of contact there.
You know,
Waller almost piggybacking Sheridan.
Yeah, that was almost a pig. He just wanted that defensive play so bad. Sheridan doing a great job of bodying him out, really getting his body around that disc. So Waller just resorting to reaching around wherever he could to try to get a hand on it. This matchup is going to be really exciting to see throughout the game. Sheridan with a hug to Penaya. Look at that spacing.
Way to run that one on for a beautiful score. Second shot through the legs. You do love to see it. Penaya putting it up 3-2.
And he's stoked.
And this is the thing so far. We have seen only the cleanest ultimate from Marvelous DC. We don't see many calls. We see a couple of contested calls as to whether or not the disc was up or down. But in terms of body contact, we haven't seen a lot of that. So to see players like Waller and the rest of the Marvelous DC line just get that little bit more physical, a little bit more aggressive, really shows that the fire has been lit under them by the energy that HMC have brought out in this, the first half of the final for the 2020 Division 1 Mixed Ultimate Championships.
And Penaya is still high off of that point. Interestingly, when the season started, he was actually looking to pick up with another Christchurch-based team, MVP, Minimum Viable Product. We have seen them yesterday on the live stream, and they were a no practice team. Penaya looking at, picking up with his mates, but when he was looking, just reassessing what he wanted out of the season. HMC is a team that he has helped to build from the grassroots. A lot of players he went to university with. So while he has moved to Wellington and didn't get a chance to practice with them, obviously with deep shots like that, it's not an issue. First going for the layup block, and Neil just holstering it.
A beautiful attempt to dribble the disc up by Haberfield, turning into a deep cut. Neil goes up backwards.
An impressive display of athleticism, trying to reel in that disc, but again, hugging and trying to receive the disc when it's just over your head can be such a challenge. Neil can't quite hold on to it. Muldrew with the throw.
HMC going to punish that attempt by Marvelous. Furs now near sideline, marked by Neil. We know both of these players have the big guns to send the disc along. We see it. Furs goes up.
Seeing it into the ground.
Muldrew maybe could have got there, possibly pulling out, recognizing the presence of Haberfield, wanting to keep it clean.
Haberfield picking up the disc, and Marvelous DC running a vertical stack. We see Hoban just keeping his defense on his toes there, initiating a cut a bit too soon. Soper for the strike cut into the safe hands of Aaron Neal.
This is the kind of ultimate that we want to see. A pass over the heads of Soper.
There.
Haberfield going to clean that one up.
Just directing it, they knew we were on the same page before the throw even went up. Just seeing that space, throwing it into space, and Haberfield just easily running onto that.
Aaron Neal now working with Heather Hickey.
And Hickey, she's just a glue player right now. She's running that middle field. She's got the legs as well as the throws to make those initiating small passes.
We see Hoban again. Soper now. So much pressure. We're seeing HMC just sticking tight as they can. Haberfield with a bid, not able to keep it off the turf. HMC yet another opportunity. We know that they can capitalize on these ones. We've seen them do it before. It's a great moment for them to widen the scoreline. Marvelous DC having to get their heads back on, switching back onto defense, hoping to close the game out, keeping it tied.
And first looking to center it off that dangerous line. Not enough. Oh, calling contact on the throw. And I also just want to comment, we're still in the very beginning. The score is 2-3, and we've already seen so many big displays of athleticism. Players just putting their body on the line to try to either knock that disc down or keep it up in the air, keep it alive. What does the rest of the game have in store? So a bit of conversation between Furs and Neal on the mark about what happens there. Was there contact on the throw?
This really is the finest display of ultimate that you're going to see all year. Ladies and gentlemen watching at home and those in attendance with us today. It's a great moment. Just the intensity, the sheer ferocity. These players are focused, they are drilled, they are hungry. As you said, Joe Panaya, his decision not to play with MVP dictated by the fact that MVP weren't planning to train. Someone who wants to drill, to get hungry, to really focus things up, to exhibit the kind of perfect ultimate that we've seen. He's scored 2 of the 3 points HMC have put up.
And a lot of movement out of the stack here, but HMC sticking with the safe handler resets. Clark running the downfield here all the way back to that handler space.
Covered tight by Hoban.
What defense? It's getting a bit physical, but you know what? They're on the same page, and it results in a turnover. Bid there! Mulder looking at swiping the disc out of the skies, but not quite far enough.
Hoban going from amazing pressure defense to force that turn, stopping that reset from coming through, forcing a change of hands, and then able to quickly get into position to attack the zone with the speed that only he has. A nice, comfortable catch, bringing it back to a 3-all game.
And great to see, you know, regardless of whoever scored that point, you know, Marvelous DC saw it into the breadbasket, but regardless of who scored that point, both teams are giving each other high fives. And that's a great way to build mental resilience. I mean, not now in the finals, this is the culmination of the season for them, but maintain that mental resilience. Great to see that they've set that example and they're maintaining that throughout the time. You know, even if you may have messed something up, even if you've done something perfectly, high fives all around to all the teammates because they are a team, everyone's involved, and one person's victory is a team's victory. We've got Robertson with the disc here. Robertson bringing a wealth of experience playing overseas, specifically in the Bay Area in San Francisco. Now back in New Zealand, sharing his experience not only with his teammates, but they've also got some developing players on the roster. Coming out with a bomb of a pull. And the Winds hanging it in the air just for a second longer. Tom Fraser going for the safe trap on the ground.
Finds Mansell, low shot out of the hands of number 20. Petra Manderson.
And Joe Panaya, the rest of HMC just dictating here. The zone, the force, sorry, is downwind. Rollman running into that space. She loves dominating that corner here.
Robertson now hoping to shift Panaya out of the way, needing to open something up to attack this zone. A great position for MDC to be in. Finds Stevenson, cuts back the other way. Fraser on the back foot. But still, the pressure from Panaya enough to make another option necessary.
Yeah, that's a great mark, really. Waller looking for the disc. Bit of contact, he's just didn't quite catch it on the line.
Waller pinned down in that corner, but he's got the throws to make this work.
And I want
to shift Sheridan, sees a hammer across field.
And when you have a receiver like Trey, the big dog Stevenson, you know, it's hard to say no. I also wanted to comment with the marks there. Panaya, Sheridan, there were constant looks to break upfield, really beautiful cuts by Wall or Weatherall trying to open up that break side of the field, but the Marks were shutting that down, really playing that 50% of the defense, making it easier for their downfield counterparts to stop that open side.
MDC with a necessary point there, a break to take it to 4-3. Now given the opportunity to work back the field the other way, the rain coming down heavier, conditions getting just a little bit more miserable. It's time for those teams to really focus up, to drill down, find those deeper reserves, make sure that those catches come consistent, those little errors that we maybe saw in the sort of first early points of the game going to slowly dry up as the ground gets wetter. It's shaping up to be a fantastic game. Two evenly matched teams, probably the two most evenly matched teams that we've seen in this tournament so far.
And we're seeing potentially lines are tightening. Lines are being called for sure for Marvelous DC. And it looks like they're talking about a person defense match going downfield. Tom Fraser with a hand up in response to Robertson there, signaling that they're ready to receive the disc. And the sun may not be out, but the guns definitely are. Shoulders are bared, and the big throws coming downfield. Mansell with the disc.
A fielded pull. Tom Fraser hoping to initiate something. Finds his teammate, that offensive buddy, Joseph Panaya.
Ooh.
A wobbly throw coming out again with the wet disc. Less control, less spin, less stability.
Was that the mark? Was that Robertson with a touch on it there? Or was that just the wet disc, as you were saying?
We may never know. A pick has been called. So Ryan Sheridan unable to track his pursuit of number 25 for Marvelous DC, Ben Waller. Given the opportunity to catch up before play resumes. Robertson with the disc, Panaya on the mark. These two titans of New Zealand Ultimate. Troy Stevenson marked by Tom Fraser.
And really great intensive defensive pressure here. Panaya doing everything he can to shut that down. Robertson getting the break off.
Fraser immediately dropping off to try and target the next threat. You cannot score a point without someone to receive it. Great high shot over the top. Weatherall chasing it down.
Reading it.
Great layout. And that has been kept in the hands of Marvelous DC. We'll see that again. Just good vision, tracking, good field awareness.
And Weatherall there, important to note, what a bid. You know, when that first look came and she ended up, you know, laying out, even though the disc was out of bounds, she knew she was out of bounds, but still putting her body on the line, trying to close that distance. And great just, like mental focus, mental energy, preparing for the next time when that needed to happen. Right here, she was ready to make it happen. She was already warmed up for that bid.
Absolutely. Just a subtle reminder to yourself, Eva, you're going to be here later. So practice now. You know there's going to be a layout in this corner. It comes earlier than expected as Marvelous DC go up 5-3, two back-to-back breaks for this team. HMC a little on the back foot now despite an early lead that they've now conceded to Marvelous DC. Probably the only team in New Zealand Ultimate who can actually push Marvelous DC at the moment, but MDC up by 2 to come out on defense one more time.
And you know, I think I'm going to touch on this again because that energy that HMC brought out, what was the hot, magical charisma that they brought out in those first 2 points, was really just wow, sitting on the sideline here and watching them take that to the field. I think Marvelous DC is really, you know, may have shook them a little bit in those first 2 points. Now they're really responding. I'd like to see HMC continue that energy. Mansell with a backhand, and the disc is just too slippery for Panaya to hold on to. Loving this.
Looks like that came off his shoulder, giving Robertson possession again for Marvelous DC. Shifting the mark, low shot, but it finds Waller. Call was made. Number 24 for HMC, Tracy Keaton.
Robertson throwing not just some throwing fakes, but also some shoulder fakes, just shifting his movement to also move Panaya on the mark to open up that break, because Panaya, again, has been shutting down those round marks, really, you know, putting the wall in the way of the break side of the field, really challenging those throws. All right, so right now, Fraser and Waller discussing where they were in space when that call was made. Fraser backing up a few steps.
Both teams just taking the opportunity to catch a breath, just a few seconds.
Judd with a great undercut there. Waller choosing instead to look to do some feisty really contested handler cuts.
Great pressure by Panaya, but the disc finds Aaron Neal center field, marked by Sheridan. Panaya again, just squirrely, not able to get in front of it. Robertson.
Movement happening downfield. It looks like they're really trying to find Waller there. A lot of movement happening.
Sam Rollman, disc on the near sideline, has to reset, finds Neil Sheridan out of position, working to get back in, hoping to shut down that side.
Neil just directing traffic, saying, no, I want you here. Beautiful around throw to Waller.
And a second one, but it's a little bit high this time. Players with a chance to get in. Jumps in from what seems like it might have been halfway down the field. Beautiful score.
Mansell saw that coming, and I saw her peeling off into that space at the same time when a person like Waller has that disc and he's already in the air. Jumping in the way of that momentum can be a bit dangerous, so props to Mansell for recognizing that danger, peeling into that space, getting that poach tee, but then seeing the potential danger and, jumping out. You can see that cheeky smile because she knew she wanted to get that defensive play, checking in with players on the sideline. They're like, yeah, Mansell, we know you as a player and she knows the field so well.
Absolutely great score there by Ben Wall, number 25 from Marvelous DC. Taking the score to 6-3 now. We seem to be seeing just a couple of really, really consistent breaks from Marvelous DC. They may have stepped things up just a little bit. HMC bringing out the fire, but Marvelous D seeming to have brought out a larger one of their own.
So again, bringing the conversation back to the beginning of the game when we were checking in with both teams, and I was surprised initially. I said Marvelous DC wanted to bring out the intensity and really try to dominate the first few points, which was slow to happen because HMC really brought it out. And it looks like, while they may have been slow to the start, this is really where they are fulfilling that goal, stretching the score 6-3 and putting some kilometers in between them and HMC. So putting into the minds of HMC that they really need to work to pick back up and get to that same level.
Still anybody's game, only 3 points in it. We've seen these teams come back from worse deficits. Marvelous DC having conceded a half time, so Space Invaders allowing them to go up to 8 points before Marvelous DC were able to do it. They will be unwilling to let a team like HMC put them through that ordeal twice, maybe just showing that the foundation on which some of the best Ultimate in the country has been built is not foolproof. We're seeing a couple of execution errors, a couple of timing issues from HMC. If they can tighten those up, they can definitely compete going toe-to-toe with the central superheroes, Marvelous DC.
And I think they definitely can. If HMC, they're showing they can play at that level right now. It's just cleaning up a few things, as you mentioned, to get to that point. But with the tenacity, the ferocious defense they're throwing on, they're hungry to really make those blocks, make every throw as challenging as possible for Marvelous DC offense, and they really have been converting quickly on offense as well after when they get that defensive play. So, I'm really, the ball's in their court, and they have the power to definitely bring it back. They'll be starting on offense here, so we might be getting a taste of that just now.
Yeah. Now, we've seen HMC put in some fantastic work, particularly in their zone offense, using those same give and goes. Marvelous DC probably recognize this, and while we have seen them throw down zone defenses against previous teams, knowing that that's the kind of thing the HMC offensive line can eat up, they're probably going to stick to that same match defense, trying to isolate those matchups, those power players like Panaya and Fraser, and just really shut those down as strong as possible.
And Fraser to Mansell, back to Fraser. Big around pass to Sheridan. They've got the whole field in front of them. Straight
through the middle to Panaya, back to Fraser. Witherell with another bid. Maybe unnecessary considering the angle of that disc, just those execution errors needing to be tightened up.
But you can't put the disc around her when she's in a defensive space like that. Once it's within her realm of potential reach, she's going to go out and generate that turnover. So definitely, while it could have been on the ground, maybe not necessary, she was just confirming this disc is going to the ground and this is going to be a turnover. No one else can clean this up right now. Marvelous DC calling a timeout, potentially just to capitalize, trying to potentially put a nail in the coffin to try to bring it into halftime just a little bit faster. So we'll see what they're calling here.
Yeah, using that opportunity to maybe reevaluate the position on the field. So those quick turns can be troubling, particularly if they're off a long shot. You can find that your offense are definitely out of position when you gain possession of the disc, whereas calling a timeout, the offense has to reset before the defense can get into position, but it allows you to really have a think about what you're planning to do coming out of the timeout, hoping to close out the point.
And we've got here the Marvelous DC sideline just building up the energy there. HMC responding with a massive cheer of their own. Both teams back on the field. Marvelous DC, because they're on offense, setting up first.
And we're seeing the wind start to pick up now. A cross breeze, so coming from the far side of the field to the near side, which means that number 55, Aaron Neal, has the disc on the low side. The wind is going to be working against him if he wants to try and exploit the width of the field, as MDC want to do, using as much space as possible and relying on their athleticism to progress the disc. Doesn't anyway, sends a high one. Ben Waller underneath at a comfortable score as they go 7-3 against HMC, only 1 point away from taking halftime.
And I think comfortable is well put there, and I think they definitely discussed that when they were in that timeout huddle. Who's going to score this point? Who's hungry right now? And Waller is but a growing boy. He always wants to nom up more discs. Ready to comfortably again see that into his hands, secure the point. And now Marvelous DC need one more to take half. HMC hot on the tail though. Definitely curious to see how they're going to respond to this, because they have, again, the tenacity, the power, the drive to respond.
Not an insurmountable barrier at all. Only 4 points in it. HMC are incredibly hungry in a previous game that saw Hamilton Prime forced into the bronze final. They were tied 4-4 before a series of breaks just allowed HMC to pull ahead, getting a 6-point lead from a tied game. If we see that same kind of intensity that's dialed in on those executional little tweaks, we'll be able to see them pull this one back, maybe even tying the game at 7-7, maybe even taking half themselves.
And we see, as per usual, Robertson with disc in hand, ready to pull. Seasoned puller, which can be so beneficial on defense. You know, if you get the disc on the right part of the field and your teammates get down there fast enough, generate a turnover, can result in a quick point.
Yeah, the two initial points of a defensive point are going to be the pull and then subsequently the positioning, getting that defense in place, trying to pressure, in this case, Peter Hoban against Tom Fraser, who lets a low flat one rip over the heads of Heather Hickey, finds ground.
Right there.
We saw Manderson unable to get there.
And Mansell poached for just a second there, saying, hey, Tom Fraser, look at me, I'm open. But he had eyes for that receiver. And to be fair, there definitely was the separation as well. In slightly less windy conditions, it may have been a connection. Judd running onto the disc there, just a bit too high for her.
A great opportunity now for HMC to capitalize. They're in the red zone. Sheridan working the disc. Waller poaching off, trying to shut something down, finding Panaya. Big shift, huge fakes, trying to shift the mark, a high backhand. Beautiful score!
To Mansell in the end zone.
That is exactly the kind of energy HMC needed in this. A clash against Titans. MDC now 7-4, still in the lead. HMC hoping to mount a comeback. Woo!
And Mansell, a really experienced player on this team. We're really going to trust her hands. Her hands are going to be really beneficial, just safe catches for the team, especially given these conditions. She was actually nominated for a Friction Gloves Catch of the Year during her campaign with the U24's mixed team. She had an insane, just followed that bobbled catch and laid out just as you know, to clean up the rubbish. So those safe hands are going to come in so beneficial here on a day like today with the wind, with the rain, a slippery disc, and we can see there in the end zone she's going to hold on to things definitely. Furs with the pull.
MDC, despite an impressive run of back-to-back breaks, now in a position reminded that HMC will punish any mistakes that are made. Judd bobbling the disc off the hands, probably a little bit down before having to get fired up by her teammates, as that results in a very, very quick turnaround. HMC putting another one on the board. The defensive pressure that we're seeing now, a fantastic pull. Hopefully able to pin Aaron Neal on the sideline. Caitlin Wood setting up the mark. MDC looking downfield.
He has his hands out saying, guys, where are my options? HMC trying a bit of a zone.
Heavy field with a big rip.
And Furs is in the way. Not today, guys. Seb.
Just great defense by HMC. So the disc will come in on the near sideline, right in front of HMC's defensive zone. The full field ahead of them to work it. But we've seen that they do have the long throws. You just put them up. they can match those big players like Riley Van Turnhout, Liam Haberfield, those long throws on the MDC line. They can just play tennis backwards and forwards if they need to.
And a swing to the middle of the field. Disc in the hands of Wood.
Wood throws an interception straight to Sopo, recenters to Haberfield. High shot.
And it floats! Indeed!
Great defensive pressure by Cameron Bennett as he evolves that into the most impressive deep cut, completely unmarked.
Stevenson catching up there, and when Stevenson is in that area, you know, those deep shots can be dangerous to put up.
The wind picking up just a little bit now.
Mulder fighting to get open, managing to make that movement on Hamilton, has the disc, inside out pass to Clark. Clark fakes
the big rip.
Absolutely, he wanted that, didn't he? Mulder with the disc again, looking to the open side, and the wind pushes it just out of reach. Impressive bid to stay with it, but Booth couldn't quite come down with it. Disc in the safe hands of Beck Soper.
And we're seeing the wind change direction slightly, so there's a bit of a lateral component now. Marvelous DC with the wind at their backs. Big fakes to shift Bennett. Troy Stevenson offloading.
Neal with the disc, and a high release backhand downwind.
Hamilton pulls that one down for a great score as Marvelous DC take half.
And you can do that, you know, when you've got a line of big players like that. Hamilton, Stevenson, Haberfield, and Neal, like those four big guys, you know, if you put the disc in the air, those 50-50s all of a sudden become much more in your favor. So, you know, popping the disc up, definitely a safe option to Hamilton, made safer by the height.
Just a fantastic display by both of these teams. 8-4 as Marvelous DC take half, but they've been pushed in this first half more than we've seen them pushed all tournament. The clinical ultimate that they're known for not going to work against the oppressive defense of HMC. My name is Blair Monroe.
And I'm Kelsey Bielik.
And we will be back with the second half of the final of the Division 1 Mixed Ultimate Championships, the clash in Kirikiriroa in Hamilton, New Zealand, very soon.
surprised Riley hasn't been playing that.
And we are back for the second half of the final match. Marvelous DC, MDC versus HMC, codename Wings and Poppers. The final match of the Division 1 New Zealand Mixed Ultimate Championships in increasingly raining Hamilton, New Zealand. My name is Blair Monroe.
And I'm Kelsey Bielik.
And we have been proudly fueled by the Treats food truck, keeping us warm in this wet weather. Treatsfood.co.nz for all your catering needs.
In the meantime, players on the field keeping warm using a plastic disc instead of the treats. We see Soper and Hoban throwing, just in these, again, increasingly worse conditions, trying to stay warm, but also trying to keep the throws accurate, knowing what's going to be happening when they're throwing the discs on the field.
So Marvelous DC with the disc to start off. In the blue on the right-hand side of your screen, HMC about to come out on offense in the white. Now, we've seen some great energy from HMC pushing MDC, who had to really tighten things up, pulling together a string of impressive breaks before taking halftime.
I think definitely the way they came out with that firing energy put Marvelous DC on their back, but they were a bit surprised because it was one of the few times in this tournament, I mean, one of the few other teams have done this as well, but it's always a surprise to them when they're met with the same type of energy they bring. They definitely have, turned the tides a little bit, and they're coming out now on defense. They're up a few points. We'll see what HMC can do in this half.
Sheridan, Mansell, Penaya, and Fraser really initiating, driving the four players who are key, integral to the HMC offensive line. MDC now coming down in a zone.
We're seeing Hansen and a great D by Anna Crosby there. Again, Hansen, number 73 on HMC, she's been streaking deep a few points. I'm waiting for her in the future to catch that deep look. Haberfield with the disc. Great swing to Van Turnhout.
Shifting Sheridan, opening up space, crossing on the near sideline.
Great leading pass.
And then back to the far sideline for Sam Wong. Liam Haberfield on the red zone. So close to potentially another score.
Sounds like a pick has been called. The gun's out, 2 arms up, indicating that there was contact or the potential for contact on a defensive play. And Troy Stevenson seeing it into his hands despite that fierce defensive play by First. Big grin on his face as he was like, yes, next time I'm going to have that D. I'm going to keep putting my body there and contesting that, and it's going to result in a defensive play for me.
And just nice celebratory high fives by MDC. The first point out of halftime, integral to maintaining the kind of mental advantage that MDC cultivated with an impressive first half, taking the first point out of second half, despite the fact they were coming down on defense. So they've broken HMC one more time. The scoreline widens. It's 9-4. We see the HMC offensive line take the field. The wind still picking up.
And meanwhile, Marvelous DC over there, hands out as if they're flying, just indicating that it's a female point. So they're going to start with 4 women on the field.
It's almost as though after that initial push of points by HMC that we're seeing a sort of an MDC unleashed, forgoing the sort of strictly clinical ultimate that we've seen and just being willing to be a lot more aggressive, a lot more hungry, finally being pushed to the kind of exciting ultimate that really makes for a great final.
But it's going to take, a lot of work to fracture that focus of Marvelous DC. We see Hamilton prancing, just leaping down the field to close in on the handler mark there.
Manderson, great reception, finds Fraser on the far sideline, marked by the big limbs of Hamilton, shifting, a foot goes up, trying for the block, Fraser threads one through.
Wow, and Robertson just takes flight there, everything except the cape, soaring through the air, and he misses the disc. But again, one of those instances where the mental pressure really can generate that turnover, because Penaya could not quite come up with the disc.
Penaya back on defense now. A huge amount of pressure on that mark. Not enough. Waller has to read the wind to get the disc. Losing a few yards, but maintaining possession. Waller and Robertson working backwards and forwards.
I'm loving this connection, these connections on offense, Waller and Robertson. Also these connections on defense, Sheridan and Penaya, contesting every juke, every reset, every attempted break. these matchups are really a treat to watch.
Just very, very busy on the defense, but not wasteful. Looking to shut off throws as the other defender reads where those cuts are developing.
Mansell hanging out downfield, anticipating a deep look, and she's ready to pounce on that if it does go up.
Great defensive pressure. The stall count getting a little bit higher. Waller has to come back to help out. Sheridan sagging off to stop the first throw before closing in to put that mark on. Threads one around. Witherall with a great cut underneath. Finding disc center field. Having to look back to Waller again.
And Hansen marking Wetherall there was looking for a D. We've got the second attempt at a defense running through D. But Marvelous DC is just closing in too fast on those discs, making it challenging. Here it's impossible for any of these players to actually get through and reach around. Discs in the hands of Sally Neal.
Waller takes to the skies, pulls one down. Ryan Sheridan applying that pressure on the mark. Those throws from the MDC line having to be respected, so we're seeing huge shifts on the defense, but hoping to shut everything down. A nice, comfortable backhand from Ruhlman finds Robertson, still marked by Panaya.
Marvelous DC in their end zone right now, finding Wetherall on the break side.
Good separation from Hansen. Threads one through to Ruhlman for the score.
And again, while that defensive play we saw in each one of those cuts that got open, you know, HMC on defense was contesting it hot behind, even trying to bait the D. But it's difficult to bait the D when, you know, the offense is going to rush through, you know, even speed up when attacking the disc. It's incredibly challenging to generate a turnover when, you know, players are that fast on offense and they know what's going to happen if they do let up.
And really, just probably the most exciting ultimate we've seen from MDC all weekend. They know that if they let up for just a second, if they ease the foot off the pedal at all, HMC will establish a very, very rapid turnaround, a reversal of fortunes, narrowing the 6-point margin MDC have clawed ahead to get and closing off that gap and hopefully putting a nail in the coffin of the MDC legacy, wanting to win their first championship and put the first loss, the first mark in the loss column for MDC in a very, very long time, a timeout being called.
And also good to revisit here that it would be an exciting win for Marvelous DC, but also given the new rule about super teams, it could be the end of a legacy. The rule that's going into place just limits the number of players that you can pick up from outside the region, and Marvelous DC is based in Wellington, but have picked up players from across New Zealand as part of the family, part of the fun now. So this new rule will split that and not allow them to, you know, come together and play together. That said, Marvelous DC has done a really good job, you know, just with the Wellington component. The tournaments that they've sent just those regional players to do, they're such dominant players, they do often come out on top. So it could be the end of Marvelous DC as a club, or it could just change it and transition it so that they focus a bit more, you know, on development within exclusively the Wellington region. We'll see.
Just really, really great clinical ultimate despite the conditions. We're not seeing unforced errors, which is the key thing. We're seeing turns coming from both teams, pouring on the energy in terms of defense. They're forcing these areas, they're covering those throws. That clinical precision's still there. It's just that those windows are becoming narrower and narrower as both of these teams dial up the intensity. A 6-point deficit, it's significant but not insurmountable. We're going to see MDC come out on defense one more time. The HMC offensive line taking the field. Those same key players, Mansell, Panaya, Sheridan, Fraser.
And Heather Hickey on the sideline just said it, my thoughts exactly. That sideways rain, though.
So again, we're seeing huge amounts of gusty wind blowing from the far sideline now to the near sideline. Carrying with it the wind, so conditions are wet, they are windy. As fun as it might be, it does not make it easy to control the movement of a disc in this weather condition.
And Neil, alias Superman on Marvelous DC, hand up and launching the disc downfield to start the next point. We've got Mansell picking up and swinging to Sheridan. The two will be handling together at this point. And Sheridan looking at that deep option.
Massive rip. Panaya hoping to get free from Hoban. Goes up. Number 6, Peter Hoban. Just the foot speed. Uncommon.
Just really bodying Panaya out of that opportunity.
Gibson sends one through. A great defensive effort from M24 Tracy Keaton, securing the disc. Just excellent pressure. HMC right on the red zone now, a point that they desperately need to keep themselves in the game. Panaya to pick up, marked by Hoban again, trying to shift it, sends a wide one out, uncovered. Eva Weatherall, as fast as she is, only able to close once. Hansen has it in hand.
And again, it's challenging on the break side. You know, you're trusting your mark to stop that break side look. You know, a handler like Panaya can really put it anywhere on the field. And the huck goes up downfield. Stevenson in pursuit, lays out, and it looks like the disc just bounced down, even nicked his face a little bit there.
The Birdman a little less controlled in flight than we might otherwise expect from Troy Stevenson. HMC.
Fraser with the disc.
Near sideline, hoping to work for something. We're seeing cuts develop from downfield.
Sheridan fighting physically.
A big spin, Panaya underneath it.
I think there was a high stall there. Panaya managing to scoop that up and bring it in action roll.
Mr. Consistent himself. A great score by Panaya as we go 10-5. Please tell me we get to see that again.
What energy to that point there. You know, you're focusing on one thing, and next thing you know, it's an epic huck downfield. I think Fraser, you know, he spun around before throwing that. It wasn't the cleanest release, which leads me to believe that it may have been a high stall count. And props to the Marvelous DC defense for shutting down each of those resets, really putting the pressure on there to force that throw. That said, great option nonetheless, and Panaya streaking downfield with some insane separation.
And we have seen Miller Mercer on the Space Invaders line add a bit of spin to his pull for a bit more torque. Maybe Tom Fraser was taking a leaf out of his book, adding that extra rotation to the throw. It came out a bit wobbly, but maybe the heat, the will of the Warrior into that disc to send it downfield for Panaya to scoop that one up. Putting one more on the board as we go 10-5, still in favor of Marvelous DC, but with that margin narrowing, HMC to come out on defense. We've got some great players that we've seen put in some fantastic work. Cameron Bennett, number 28, number 10, Tony Clark.
We've got Sean McDonald with the disc. Looks like they're matching up on defense. McDonald with his hand up, signaling that they might be ready. Waiting for Marvelous DC to echo that Haberfield saying, yep, we're ready to. Disc goes up. And Hamilton backing up to catch the pull, centering it to Haberfield. Looks like Marvelous DC is in a vertical stack. It's a bit far from the disc, so the cut comes from the front there.
Jack Kitty bobbles it but keeps it secure. Finds Haberfield again. Cameron Benefit, Bennett rather.
You know, a lot of cuts coming from the front of the stack here. Again, I think that might be because the Marvelous DC stack is a bit deep. Going up to Hamilton, can he get it? Sees it safely into his hands.
Resets to Heather Hickey. Trying to work the disc off the sideline. Liam Haberfield unmarked. Sends a nice one up to Jack Kitty.
Also unmarked. And
high release to Neil.
Really exploiting these spaces. You know, they're open, and so the players, if Marvelous DC's players open, they're going to make that safe option and hit them.
Furs again trying to pour on that defensive pressure. A little bit late. Goes for the bid anyway. Kitty pulls it down despite the intensity from his HMC opposition. The score is now 11-5. Marvelous DC 4 points away from victory. HMC wanting to establish that comeback. We've seen the kind of connections that their offensive line is able to have.
And speaking of offensive lines, it's interesting contrasting this with the last game we saw where the conditions were, you know, a bit worse. The sun is starting to come out, lights, you know, starting to enter once again. But these points are slightly shorter, and I think that could be due just to the clean offense that both teams are playing. You could also argue, I mean, there's some great defensive intensity, but, you know, when both teams are playing really great defense, points tend to stretch out. So strong offense is what we're seeing from both teams, resulting in really rapid points.
Yeah, just really, really great. Great fire from both of these teams, maybe lacking some of the patience that we saw, particularly on offense, which could be a function of huge amounts of defensive pressure being put on. Closing down those options, the stall count gets high. We have to throw something.
Robertson with the disc. Big energy on the sideline from Marvelous DC, trying to carry them down the field.
And we're seeing Sam Wong take the line. Had a great performance against Flood. Some nice scores, nice defensive blocks, a great hand block in the zone.
Oh, and that is one of a few bobbles we've seen, you know, catching the pole. Tom Fraser, when he's going to catch the pole, we've seen him just seeing it down to the ground. Sheridan looking at catching that to get it moving right away, but, you know, when the disc is wet.
A little more ambitious. Offensive line playing defense now. Robertson sends one across to Troy Stevenson.
We're seeing a lot of give and goes here. Not quite in the end zone yet. Finding Rollman, who managed to get some separation on the open side there.
Just a great performance there by MDC, 12-5. A very, very exciting final. The sky seems to have dried up a little bit.
But the disc is still wet. You know, when it's hitting the grass, it's going to pick up that moisture. So while it's raining a bit less, the disc is definitely going to still be slippery.
MDC in a very, very comfortable position to be in. But again, HMC opened this game with fire. They will be looking to close this game with fire. And so now to come down again on defense, Marvelous DC, knowing that they can generate those breaks, they can force errors, they can convert on those. HMC 7 points behind now, not wanting to make any further mistakes, needing a hold here to keep themselves competitive.
And we've been seeing a lot of person defense here. A lot of person defense. It's been working well for Marvelous DC thus far. No reason to change anything up if it's working well, but we'll see if they do get creative.
A nice long pull from Robertson. Sheridan not want to make the same mistake twice.
Some give and goes, just making up that ground from the pull. About at the brick mark now.
Great
Sheridan
cut from Panaya from the back of the stack.
Looking break.
Muldrew pressured by Stevenson, finds Mansell. Panaya near sideline. Mark by Robertson sends a big shot up with a lot of edge. Troy Stevenson chasing it.
And dropping it. That was so well placed with the wind. You know, Stevenson's a huge mark to get around, but with the wind, he managed just to snake it around Stevenson's reach. Oh, and a bid. She couldn't quite come down with it.
Just heartbreaking. Tracy Keaton going to ground to try and get that necessary score for HMC. Marvelous DC a long field ahead of them to work back up. We've seen them do it multiple times now.
And again, with Panaya on the mark here, he's really been contesting every break throw.
Lets one slip through. Troy Stevenson, a hop off the ground, pulls that high edge backhand. Ruhlman secure hands on the far sideline. Sorry, marked by Hansen.
Keeping that break side of the field going. Weatherall fakes the deep look. Waller really wanted that.
Goes back to Robertson. Really driving the MDC offense. A low release forehand to find Wong. Resetting to Eva Witherall.
Great movement here. Really dynamic. They're seeing options on the field, not just to the open side. Muldrew was chasing that down. Ooh, he was hungry for that.
Great disc movement. A long shot from Witherall.
That was well placed. That just shows experience playing with each other. Wetherall saw Rollman going deep. Rollman, a fast player, but Wetherall just knowing her speed, exactly where to pull it. Put it just enough speed for Rollman to run onto the disc here.
And that really is one of the key things. Knowing your teammates. We've seen quite a few points throughout this tournament that could have been scores, but we're seeing overthrows. We're seeing the disc just a little bit ahead of the player, or even worse, maybe a little bit behind it, not respecting your player's speed. Seeing a team like Marvelous DC, that Witherall-Ruhlman connection where there's that awareness of what each other is capable of, a great forehand with just a little bit of edge to curve it around and back in front of Ruhlman for a fantastic score by Marvelous MDC. 13-5, only 2 points away from victory if they're able to secure those same breaks that we've seen them take a run on against HMC in this final match.
And we've seen a lot of disc time in Marvelous DC from Haberfields, Neal, Robertson, Waller, really running the field. But that point there, also great to see the women showing the depth and the experience, the throws. It's mixed ultimate, and this team is really has depth on every side of the roster.
Marvelous DC one more time. Coming down on defense.
Neal with the pull.
Beautiful rip.
And the sun is coming out for the last part of this game. Oh,
The
tripping
heavens
over
will be smiling
the disc.
upon one of these teams as the sun shines down upon us now.
And Hickey pinching into the lane there, forcing the open side. Furs manages to find that quick inside out just in front of him.
Pickering, who receives that, resets to Furs. We're targeting this near sideline, being forced this way. Hamilton on the mark. Paige Hansen goes back to Furs now, marked out by the impressive, aggressive Peter Hoban. Pickering now.
And Pickering just, managing to find that separation. She's just getting open over and over again on offense. And a little Mac there resulting in a turnover.
Just great defense there by MDC. Hoban immediately occupying that deep space, knowing that he can cover almost the entire end zone as long as he's roughly in the middle. We're seeing Neil slowly walk to the disc, marked by Tony Clark.
Two Neils back together, actually. Big around put to Hamilton.
Pulls it down.
Out of the sky. To Hoban also really just, showing the height on their team. Why throw it in the breadbasket when you can give the fans,
Forcing a low throw. Great pressure there.
She's streaking deep, looking for a potential bookends opportunity, but Furs looking instead to keep it under.
Pickering with an explosive catch marked by Judd. Tony Clark behind, waiting for Hoban to get in. He sends a low flat shot ahead.
Furs on the racehorse, but he can't quite get there.
A great territorial throw by Tony Clark, number 10 on the HMC line. Marvelous DC having to work back up the entire field. We know they're able to do it, but HMC really pouring on the defensive pressure, doing everything they can to arrest the movement of the Marvelous DC juggernaut.
I've been really enjoying watching the defense that HMC's been throwing on. Marvelous DC really has some beautiful offensive flow, but seeing the ways in which, especially the marks and the resets, have been contesting every one of those throws, stopping those rounds. Just seeing Furs here, trying to take away the options. It's been exciting, watching HMC's defense in particular.
Sean McDonald on the defense there finds Tony Clark, who resets to Hanson on the near sideline, marked out by number 7, Sally Neal. Pickering pressured by Judd, hoping to shift that mark, hoping to open up the field. Something. Contact made by Neal.
And it looks like Neal was clearing out of that space, just, tripped a little bit. And Pickering was, stepping out at the same time. We can revisit that replay. It did look like he was trying to clear out of that space, though.
Clearly, it seems like it was unintentional, but there's no denying that the contact occurred, which
Absolutely.
is the important thing. That needs to be resolved. What should happen? What initiated that contact? How do we begin, go about the process of resuming play?
I mean, yeah. Great calm conversation between both teams. Great display of sportsmanship and spirit of the game.
So it will be a contested foul. Pickering still to retain possession. Caitlin Wood.
Oh, and Clark streaking deep, just hungry to score the point there. First taken to the skies, but couldn't quite come down with it.
Fingers underneath the rim. It goes to ground. Caitlin Wood with a great layout to keep it alive. It's
And
not enough. Hamilton.
ran up to the disc there, wanted to look deep to Neal.
Neal, the big man, jumping the score in. 14-5 in favor of Marvelous DC, only 1 point away.
Neal coming down from so high that he almost stumbled on his own landing.
I think we felt that one from there as he touched down. We're going to see that again. It's
Superman
a great big rip.
shaking the ground as he scores that point. Didn't quite stick the landing, but he still gets the points from it.
So absolutely phenomenal performance by Marvelous DC. Still 1 point in it. And that really is one of the big threats with these MDC players. Huge amounts of experience, huge amounts of fitness, of great depth of throws. Any turnover they can punish. And so playing against them really does demand nothing less than perfection. A timeout has been called. HMC still 10 points for them to score if they want to win this game.
And we see in this timeout here, HMC has recognized the score and they recognize that they're going to need to turn up the heat, make things, a bit more spicy, potentially trying to, push Marvelous DC back out of the kitchen. take control here if they want to stay in the game. Marvelous DC, on the other hand, recognizing that this is their chance to finish it all up. I'm curious to see what they're going to do. They're going to keep lines open, or are they going to put on a line that they expect will just close up the game? And HMC first to break the huddle. With a loud cheer, we see players taking the field.
So the offensive line, that core group, we're going to see Tom Fraser, Sheridan by the looks. Although a couple of their defensive players as well. Is that McDonald taking the line for HMC?
And line being called at the other end of the field for Marvelous DC. As you see on your screen, players walking off field. Now the reason that the cameras are on the ground now is instead of the view of the whole field that you might be used to is because of the conditions that we had earlier. It wasn't quite as safe to keep a camera up at that elevation, so instead we're viewing the field at ground level the way we're watching the game as well.
So it comes down to this. HMC with a significant deficit, MDC only 1 point away from victory. Every point matters from here on out. Marvelous DC, they've got a cushion. They can maybe ease up if they need to, but they know that any opportunity that they give HMC will capitalize. They can capitalize. They will be able to break those ones through. HMC need this to stay in the game. MDC hoping to sew things up, securing the gold medal for themselves.
Beautiful hang time on the throw there, allowing the defense, Marvelous DC defense, to book it down the field. And Sheridan directing the traffic to Tom Fraser. Tom Fraser backing up with the hook, seeing that streaking open player, but Troy Stevenson is also under the disc, goes up just a second higher, and puts it directly up to Weatherall.
But Sheridan with a quick turn going up over Weatherall, working the disc on the far sideline.
There's a call, and everyone is too focused. It is really exciting ultimate. Hard to stop that. Bringing it back, it looks like, to the initial hook that Tom Fraser put up.
So possible contact on that throw. Again, speaking to the throwing skill of players like Tom Fraser, that even despite contact, able to send it a significant distance down the field with enough height for players to get underneath it to get a really good read on it. Troy Stevenson getting a better read on it in this instance.
So at this point, players need to return to where they were when Fraser released that throw. Everyone trying to find that spot on the field. We'll see what Fraser's looking for.
Fraser instead looking back downfield. Wong with a great block. Sheridan trying to reset to Fraser, unable to make that connection. Lachlan Robertson near sideline sends one flat low across the field. Liam Haverfield, a great throw, hoping to capitalize. Ketty for Ruhlman for the score. MDC have done it. Back to back to back to back to back championships. 15-5 over their closest rivals in pool play, making it all the way to the finals. HMC, oh, muy caliente, as they kept it spicy, but not spicy enough for the Scoville scale. Our central superheroes, Marvelous DC, going up and taking a well-deserved gold medal over HMC's silver. A fantastic finish, possibly one of the most exciting matches I've seen from this MDC side. As we finish out the tournament, the clash in Kirikiriroa, the 2020 Division 1 Mixed Ultimate Championships. My name is Blair Monroe.
And I'm Kelsey Bielik. Thank you for joining us yesterday, this entire weekend, for a really exciting weekend.
And we will see you again next year.